Let's talk about health points. We're going to start by drawing the health points over our player's head, so the points will move around with him as he moves throughout the room, gaining points or losing points. So we will start by opening our player object, and we're going to look in the create event. Right now in the create event, we have two variables. We are going to add one new variable. I'm going to call it HP. We're going to set that equal to 100 to start. Now we're going to add a new event. This will be a draw event, and we just want the top draw event. So draw. In our draw event, we are going to add this description. We're going to show the HP over our player's head. In general, the object is drawn for free without adding a draw event. But as soon as you add a draw event, you have to start by drawing the object. And we do that by writing draw self. And you can scroll through here, or you can write draw underscore S, and it will come up. Now when we code draw self, it's followed by an open and close parenthesis set and a semicolon, as always, at the end of that statement. This parenthesis set is called a parameter list. This particular built-in method requires an empty parameter list. We really should comment our code, so we're going to add a comment reminding that we must have this to see the player object. Next, we will draw the HP. And the HP will remain current while our player moves around. This time, I'm going to write draw text, and I'm going to place that text, well, let's just see. So we're going to place it at X, Y, and the text we're going to write, in quotes, we're going to write HP, a colon, a close quotes. That's called a string literal because we will literally get that string data. Then we'll have a plus sign, and we're going to add to that a new string that holds our HP. Now the reason we have to have this word string here and put HP inside that parentheses set, that parameter list, is because HP is numeric. And the only thing we can have as this third argument of our draw text parameter list is string data. This will make more sense as you become more and more proficient as a programmer. But there is a difference between numeric data, data that holds numbers, and string data, data that holds any collection of characters, whether they are alphabetical or numerical. So first we're going to draw ourselves, and then we're going to draw the words HP, a colon, and then the value that is currently in our HP. And now we're going to run the game and see what that looks like. Well, there's my player, and there's my HP being drawn, but it's being drawn on his hat. So why is it being drawn there? Well, let's go back and look at our code. We've asked the compiler to draw this string of text at the current location of our player, XY. XY is the top left corner of our player sprite. We really want that moved up a little bit, and remember that in order to move up on the Y, we will subtract. So I'm going to subtract 20 and see what that does. Run it again. And there it is. Now it's above his head. Notice that as we move our player around, the hit points will stay in the location that we placed them. They also never change. That's because we haven't added any code to change them. So now what we're going to do is reduce the health as the player progresses through the game. In order to do this, we're going to add a new event called a step event. Again, there are multiple step events, and we're just going to take this top step. So we're adding a step event. The step event fires 60 times per second because we have 60 frames per second that our game is running. In this event, we are going to constantly decrease our health. In order to decrease the health, we're going to start with our HP. That's our health variable. And we're going to subtract from that. And we're going to use a new shortcut, and that's minus equals. Minus equals is the same thing as writing HP equals HP minus something. Here, what we're going to do for now, we're going to try subtracting 1. So that would be the same thing as writing HP minus 1. HP equals HP minus 1 is the same thing as writing HP minus equals 1. This statement subtracts 1 from our current HP and then stores it back in that HP variable. So let's run this and see what happens. Oh, wow, our HP is decreasing way too quickly, way too quickly. In fact, it's negative within a few minutes. Okay, well, that's because we're subtracting 1 60 times every second, and we only start out with 100. So let's try 0.1 and run our game. Now we're still subtracting awfully quickly, and we're showing decimals, which I really don't want to do. You can play around with this number. I like 0.02 as a subtraction rate for my health. So that will take care of the health going down so quickly. And if you ignore the decimal part, it's counting down about 1 health every second, which still might seem a little fast. So you can do whatever you would like. But now I want to get rid of that decimal part. I only want my health to show up in integer increments. So in order to do that, we're going to go back to our draw event. And we're going to add another line of code. So I'm going to add a comment, and my comment will say display only integer values for HP. And in order to do that, I'm going to create a new variable called strHP, string HP, and I'm going to set that equal to string underscore format, and inside the parameter list, I'm going to write HP 3 0. Okay, so let's talk about this line for a second. String format is a way of formatting string data. String format requires 3 parameters to be passed into this parameter list. I want you to get used to using correct vocabulary. So inside this parenthesis set is our parameter list. This particular method requires 3 parameters. The first is the variable that you're pulling data from. The second is the number of place values you want to show. Those are whole number place values, not decimal place values. The third is the number of decimal places you want to show. Since our health is starting at 100 and sometimes might go a little over 100, the maximum number of places we need to show will be 3. And we will truncate that to show integer values only, having no decimal. Now down here, instead of our string HP, we're going to add our new variable, strHP, and run it again. And there's our health. No decimal, decreasing about 1 every second. The next thing we want to do is reduce our health when our player runs into a cactus. Not only do I want to reduce my health when I run into a cactus, but I'm going to give my player a special sprite that indicates that he's been injured. So first, I'm going to duplicate my player down sprite. So I'm going to right click on player down and duplicate. Again, this is the sprite, not the object, but the sprite. And I'm going to change that to player hurt. I'm going to call that player hurt. So here's my player hurt. Looks just like my player down because it is. We are going to edit this image, but first I'm going to increase the canvas size. So we're going to resize, and instead of scaling the image, we're going to see what this does. So we're going to click over here in Resize Image, and we're going to click on this down arrow, which will indicate that we're going to grow that canvas above where we currently are. And what I want to do is add 10 to the height. Now notice I have not checked maintain aspect ratio because I don't want to make it any wider. I just want to make it taller. So we're going to add 10 to the height. We're going to keep the width at 48 and we're going to apply. Now one thing we do also need to do, I want to keep my origin. So the origin, remember we talked about the origin being in the top left corner of our screen? Well, by default, the origin of each sprite is also in the top left corner. That's at 0, 0. I want that origin to be moved back down here where it was in my original sprite, which is about even with his hat. I made my sprite 10 units taller, so I'm going to bring this down 10 units on the Y. This is the X value of the origin, and the second is the Y value of the origin. It's a little confusing because there's an X there. That's not X as in X value of placement, but that just means the origin is 0 by 10. Again, the first is the X value. The second number is the Y value. Remember that making my Y value positive will move that origin down. And you'll see that little caret there. You'll see that go down as soon as I click off of this 10. So now my origin is the same place that it was before. This is actually really important. Otherwise, your character is likely to get hung up on the cactus, and we might have some other issues also. So don't forget to change your origin to 0, 10. Now we're going to open our sprite for editing. First, I'm going to drag this to the end because I want to start with my player with both hands down standing still. I'm going to use this rectangle selection tool, and I'm going to select his arm. And I'm going to Control C so that I can make a paintbrush of that arm. I'm going to now change that paintbrush to an eraser and erase his arm. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on this tool right here. This is the mirror brush tool, which will flip that arm over here so that I can also erase this arm. Now I'm going to change back to my paintbrush tool, and I'm going to choose this tool, which will flip the brush up, and I'm going to paint his arm up here. And I'll flip it again and paint it up here. So he's throwing his hands up in the air. I'm also going to switch these around because it's easier for me to use my left mouse and change this back to a regular paintbrush. And I'm going to paint his mouth so that it looks like it's open. Okay, now I'm going to select my entire player and move him up. Try to make sure that you keep him straight, and if you're not 100% sure, then turn the onion skin on and make sure that hat still lines up. So I didn't quite move him up straight the first time, but now I've got him straightened out. So I can turn onion skin back off. Now I'm going to, I think I'll just delete that. I'm going to copy this and paste it and drag it back down to the end. So he kind of jumps up and down. And when he's up, he raises his arms. And when he's down, his arms will go back down. I don't really like this so much. So I'm going to, probably should have done this to begin with. Whoops. I'm going to click off here. I'm going to select my selection tool again. And I'm going to copy this much of his shirt. Control C to make my brush. Flip it over. And I need to erase this hand here. And then I'll just draw my hand back here. So his hands are both down. And I don't like this foot looking like he's running. So I'll do the same thing. Control C to make a paintbrush. Flip it over. Paint over that. So now his hands are both down. And then they're both up. And then they're both down. And they're both up. And they're both down. I think I like that. So I'll close that for edit. And now I'm going back to my player object. So you can play around with your player image until you have a heart image that you like. And then back in our player object, I'm going back into the create event. And we're going to add a new variable called heart. And we're going to set that equal to false. Now this is what's called a Boolean variable. Boolean variables take one of two values, either true or false. In the beginning, our player is not hurt, so hurt is equal to false. When we collide with a cactus, we'll set that hurt variable to true. Now you should already have a collision with cactus. For some reason, I've lost mine, so we'll just add it back in. I am going to change the description to lose HP. And what you should have is x equals x previous and y equals y previous. And what we're going to add to that is we're going to change our sprite. Hopefully you remember we do that by setting our sprite index equal to. We're going to use our new player hurt sprite. We also need to set hurt equal to true. And now we're going to use a new event called alarm. We'll set our alarm event in just a second. But we're going to set alarm 0 equal to 60. And what this means is we're going to wait for 60 steps, and then we're going to call an event called alarm 0. We don't yet have an alarm 0, so we'll need to add that. Add event, alarm, alarm 0. And in alarm 0, we're going to lose 5 HP. We do that, HP minus equals 5. We're going to set hurt back to false. We're going to set our sprite index back to player down. And we're going to set our image index equal to 0. Remember, this will stop the animation. let's run and see how that works. First, open your room, select your background objects layer, and place a cactus close to your player. Now, we'll run our game, run into the cactus, and watch our new animation. Did you see that quick jump right there? But it didn't really animate as long as I meant it to. Now it will if I hold my left arrow key, but I don't want to have to hold my left arrow key constantly. It's not working like I want it to, and the reason is because, come back to player, it's because of this key down, no key event. Remember, the no key event is used to stop our animation? Well, but just because we aren't holding a key down, we don't always want to stop animation. Now, if we are not hurt, that exclamation point means not. So if we're not hurt, then we'll set the image speed equal to 0. And when we are hurt, we'll just leave the image speed running at normal speed. Now let's run it. There's my player. He is losing some health. He runs into the cactus, jumps up and down, and he lost 5 extra. Notice that? You kind of have to watch it because it happens pretty quickly. It's continuing to count down, and then it loses 5 real fast. And that's from running into our cactus. Now you should check to make sure that it happens from all directions. Notice here my player isn't very close to my cactus, and yet I ran into it. Let's close our game and look at our cactus sprite. Over here, underneath of our default group, is collision mask. And if you click the caret next to there to expand the collision mask, you'll see that the collision mask is the entire cactus, which is fine in general, but not really what we want here. So I'm going to change this from automatic to manual so that I can make my collision mask a little smaller. This way, my player will actually have to get closer to the cactus before he collides with it. I'm also going to pull the top of this down, and we'll talk about why I'm doing that in a little bit. I'm going to pull it down about halfway. Now, I'll run my game again and see that I have to get a little closer. But if you collide with your cactus from the bottom, now we're stuck. And we can't, it never actually stops. So we constantly have this collision until we move away from it. But we're never losing the 5 points. It's just constantly counting down. So it's not quite working right. So it doesn't have anything to do with this hitbox. What it has to do with is where our player ends that hurt animation. So back in our collision, we're just going to fix that by moving down a little bit more than our X previous. So remember, to move down, we're going to add just a little bit to that Y value. adding to move down, subtracting to move up. So I'm just going to add 10 and see if that takes care of it. Now, when I run into my cactus, my human player is able to move my player away from the cactus, which really isn't what I want to be able to do. I want my player object to stay next to the cactus long enough to jump up and down so that my human player can see my really cool looking hurt sprite. So let's fix that. We're going to come into key left, click at the end of your comment so that you can add a blank line, and we're going to write if not hurt and add an open curly brace. The curly brace is shift of the square bracket, which is next to the P on your computer. Come down here to this line underneath of image speed and add a close curly brace. Then we're going to select those 3 lines and hit Tab to move them in one level. This is called indenting your code. An if statement is run if something is true, or in this case, if this is not true. If hurt is not true, we're going to run this code. And since we have more than one line of code, we need an open curly brace and a closed curly brace around that code so that all of this code only gets run if our player is not hurt. If our player is hurt and we try to use the left arrow key, nothing will happen until our player is not hurt. Now remember, we're setting that hurt variable down here in collision with cactus. We're setting hurt equal to true. And hurt will remain true until we enter this alarm 0 after 60 steps. And in alarm 0, we're changing hurt back to false. So we're no longer hurt. So we're only going to test true here while our player is jumping up and down after they've run into a cactus. Now you will need to copy this and add it to up. Again, make sure that all 3 of those lines are indented one level and you have both the open and the close curly brace. Without that close curly brace, you're going to get an error message. If you see this error message, it says, got EOF, end of file, but expected a closed curly brace, or just an end. We must have an open and closed curly brace. Curly braces, like parentheses, must come in pairs. Make sure you add that code to all 4 directions, up, down, left, and right. If not hurt, open curly brace, indent those 3 lines of code, close curly brace. Now, when you run your game and you run into a cactus, those left and right arrow keys, up and down arrow keys, are not going to work until you lose those 5 points. And we're no longer getting stuck at the bottom of the cactus. However, if we move up here far enough, one, we can walk over this cactus, which that looks a little strange. Look, I could stand on this cactus and it's not hurting me at all. I do want to check from the top. And it looks like I've walked all the way through it, but it did stop me from going down. Now it did move me automatically underneath of the cactus, but that's kind of what I want it to look like. The problem I have now is the fact that I don't want to be able to stand on the top of this cactus. So what we need is another layer in our room. I'm going to select player. I'm going to click on these two overlapping circles to create a new instance layer. And I'm going to call this layer Foreground Objects. So under the layer, we have background objects, and above the layer, we have foreground objects. And the foreground objects are going to be things we want to be able to walk behind, while background objects are things we want to be able to walk over. We're going to walk over the grass and the flowers, but we're going to walk behind the cactus. So I'm going to take this cactus object off of this layer using Control X and put it on this layer using Control V. Now when I run it, my player can walk behind the cactus without getting stuck. But if he runs into the side of the cactus or the bottom of the cactus, or if he comes down from the top of the cactus, he'll lose 5 points at the end of that hurt animation. Okay, so that was a lot. If your player isn't quite working right, make sure you back up and go back over the steps to create that hurt player. The next thing we're going to do is to celebrate when our player finds water. Now, you should have a water sprite, which I don't have. So I'm going to create a sprite, and I'm going to leave it 32 by 32. I'm going to call it water. And for now, I'm just going to make it a solid blue. I'm hoping your water is animated. Mine isn't. I also need a water object. Calling that obj underscore water and using my water sprite. And when I run into water, I want to celebrate. So in my sprites, I'm going to, one more time, duplicate player down. And I'm going to call this player celebrate. Just like with player hurt, I'm going to increase my canvas size. Lock it so that I'm adding space above the top. And I'm going to make this one also 10 pixels taller. And don't forget to change the origin to 0, 10. Open for edit. I'm just going to shrink those side menus so that we can see this a little bit easier. I'm going to pull this down to the end again. And this time, actually, I'm going to delete both of these, and I'm going to copy this so that both of my images are standing down here with his hands down. The first one, I'm going to raise my hands up again, just like I did before. I already have this hand brush here, so I'm going to use that hand brush. I'm going to use it to erase this hand, flip it over, erase this hand, pull my paintbrush back, flip up, and throw my hand up in the air, flip over, throw my hand up in the air again. I'm going to add a little grin. Oops. And I'm going to add some water drops. Now I'm going to make my water on a new frame. And I'll just make my water this colored. So I'm going to choose this frame. And I want to make some water. Okay, so there's my water. I'm going to copy that. Control C to copy. So I have a drop paintbrush. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to come over here, and my player is going to throw some water up in the air. And then he's going to reach back down, and I'm going to paste that and put it at that end. And we'll copy this one and put it at that end. So it looks like he's throwing water into the air to celebrate. So back to my player. Get my menus back. Back to my player object. And we're going to do a lot of the same code or very similar code that we did when our player was hurt. So first, we're going to go to create event, and we're going to add another variable called celebrate. And we're going to set that equal to false, because when the game first starts, we will not be celebrating. You should have a collision event with water. And I'm going to go back to my collision event with cactus because it's going to be very similar. So I'm just going to copy all of this. And I'm going to paste it over here in water. Copy and paste is a programmer's best friend, but do make sure that you update everything, including the comments. So instead of losing HP when we collide with water, we're going to gain HP. And instead of jumping up and down, we're going to throw water. In the air. We're going to leave X previous, Y previous for now. See what we need to do with that. We're going to set our sprite index instead of hurt to celebrate. Instead of hurt to true, we're going to set celebrate to true. And instead of alarm 0, we're going to use alarm 1. We're still going to leave that equal to 60. So we will add an event. Now I could actually click add event, alarm 1, or it's going to be real similar to alarm 0. So I'm just going to right click alarm 0. I'm going to duplicate this alarm, but I'm going to change it to alarm 1. And then we'll open that up. And again, instead of losing 5 HP, we are going to gain, let's gain 40 HP. Water should really revive our player quite a bit. So we'll add 40 and we'll change celebrate back to false. We'll set our sprite index to player down and we'll set our image index to 0 to stop the animation. Now, here's one problem. If we leave this HP plus equals 40 the way it is, your player will be able to gain health forever just by backing off the water and running into it again, and backing off and running into it again, and backing off and running into it again. And we want to prevent that. So we're going to add a line above there that says, if, open parenthesis, HP is less than 100, we'll let them gain health. But if it's not less than 100, we won't let them gain health. Now, regardless of whether they gain health or not, we do need to set celebrate back to false, change our sprite index back to player down, and stop the animation. So this time we won't need the curly braces. We only need curly braces when inside of our if condition we have more than one statement. Now you can put curly braces, not square brackets, around this single line, but it actually isn't necessary, and I tend not to. The only issue you're going to run into is if you don't have curly braces because you only have one statement, and then later you decide you need to add another statement. Just indenting that statement does not put it inside of that if condition. So bear that in mind. If you're afraid that you'll mess things up, then always put in the curly braces. But again, they're not really necessary. This empty line here, that isn't really necessary either. But I do want your code to be readable. And there will be some things that I expect you to do in your code. I expect you to leave blank lines here and there. I expect you to have spaces around your equals symbols. your assignment operators, that's what that equal is called, assignment operator, I'll expect you to have it around your less than or greater than symbols within your if conditions and around this plus equals operator. Now, what you cannot do is have a space between the plus and the equal. Notice as soon as I put a space between the plus and the equal, I get this error message that says unnecessary expression HP used as a statement. That's because this plus equal is a single operator, just like less than is a single operator, and equal sign is a single operator. Plus equal is a single operator, even though it actually does two things. It adds 40 to HP and it assigns that new value into HP. So adding or incrementing our HP, even though we type two different characters, this is considered a single operator. We type two characters, it has two functions, but it is considered a single operator and cannot have a space between there. Okay, so we're getting close. Remember, however, we did have to change key down. So in your key down, open key down up and look at that if statement. Instead of if not hurt, we also want to only stop our animation when we are not celebrating. We're going to use a compound condition on this if statement. So click at the end of hurt, hit a space, two ampersands, hit a space, not, exclamation point, celebrate, and this is read if not hurt, meaning hurt is false, and not celebrate, meaning celebrate is false. So we will only stop this animation if we are not hurt and we are not currently celebrating. We'll need to add that and not celebrate code inside of our four directional movement also. So we'll just copy it, go into left, hit at the end of hurt, and paste it. Into up, hit at the end of hurt, and paste. Into right, at the end of hurt, paste. Into down, at the end of hurt, paste. So again, we're only going to move when we're not hurt and we're not celebrating. That will prevent your human player from moving your player object out of the water before we're done celebrating, because we do want to celebrate just for a couple of seconds. So now, in your room, make sure you have some water. Your background objects layer is going to get pretty busy, especially once we get our large world. It already has quite a bit of stuff in it. If we scroll down here and see that it's already pretty busy. So if you want to add a water layer, you could do that. Just make sure it's under player so that player walks into the water, not behind the water. So you can add a layer if you would like and rename it water. And if you're doing that, just make sure that all of your water goes on that water layer. And I'll just put some water right here. And now I'll run this. And when my player gets to the water, whether from the side or the bottom, Well, the bottom again is causing an issue. Okay, so let's close that. Now, remember what we did with our collision with cactus? In our player object, collision with cactus, we added 10 so that we could move down just a little bit farther than our x previous, y previous. If we do that again here, and we run into water, it takes us all the way out from the top. And that kind of made sense with our cactus. Not sure that it makes sense with the water, but I'm not going to worry about it because it works. Okay, so now it's your turn. Create a palm tree if you haven't already, and add a shadow to it if you haven't already. Now I can drag that palm tree into my room, and it's maybe too big. If I want to make it smaller, I can double click and I can scale it down by changing that to 0.75. 0.75, my X scale and Y scale. Or you can always adjust it by stretching it or shrinking it. Stretch it or shrink it by pulling on the sides or squishing up the sides. So you can adjust how your palm tree looks. What I want you to do is make sure that the player object can walk behind the top of it. But when he collides with the shadow, he gains, let's say, 20 health. So we're losing 5 health for the cactus. We're losing health as we walk around. We're gaining 40 health in the water, and we're gaining 20 health on the cactus. Remember how we limited the health for the water so that we're only going to gain 40 if we're below 100? I'd also like you to do that with your cactus. Only gain if you're below 100 and only gain 20. Okay? So that's up to you. See you in class.